Welcome to the third learning module of Future Us, a roadmap to elder abuse prevention. My name is Benedict Schöpflin. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. As you know, on March 24th, 2022, CNPA released Future Us, a roadmap to elder abuse prevention. You can access it at futureus.cnpa.ca in French and in English. It is my pleasure to welcome Raeann Rideout, Director of Partnerships and Outreach at Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, who will elaborate on the practice component of Future Us. This module will highlight practice priorities and opportunities for addressing elder abuse in Canada. We hope you will also join us over the next 2 days for more modules tackling research, policy, and the law to address elder abuse in Canada. It is now my pleasure to welcome Raeann Rideout. Take it away, Raeann.
Thanks, Benedict. On behalf of Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, I'm so pleased to be invited today to speak to you about how you can take an active role in this movement for social change. For those who are not aware, my name is Raeann Rideout. I'm the Director of Provincial Partnerships and Outreach with Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. I have been involved with working with CNPA in the development of the roadmap along with other partners across Canada, and so pleased to be involved in educating individuals about this module 3, about how you can take action and be engaged in this social change. So Future Us was developed for individuals and community who have concerns about this current state of the health and well-being of older adults. And we can all work together from different places to achieve a common goal of elder abuse prevention across the country. I think it's important to also realize that this engagement strategy that we are presenting to individuals and organizations and leaders and government will grow and evolve as individuals and communities adopt it, embrace it to make changes, but also when our government partners and elected officials really recognize the need to align our investments for funding to prioritizing issues of not only all seniors issues, but specifically elder abuse prevention. We're going to go through this module looking at the 3 primary goals of the Future Us strategy. And we're going to build upon those as we go through the module and just address each one of those. And the first, as you see, was prioritizing prevention of elder abuse and neglect in every community. And we need to establish and support elder abuse prevention networks, not only at a local, regional, but also at a national level. And most importantly, teaching everyone to recognize the warning signs of neglect, to how to respond safely and effectively, and where we can refer seniors to for help in our own communities. And through this module, what we want to do is reflect on those goals as we go through and just put yourself in a situation where we know everyone can take an action. So where do you fit into this picture, and where in terms of your role and responsibilities to address the prevention of elder abuse? So as many know, this strategy was launched on March 24th through the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And this is the 3rd module in a series of 5 on Future Us, where we're going to walk through this new engagement strategy to explore some ideas and priorities related to practice and how you can contribute in your own self and ways and your roles to address that prevention. And this will be different for each individual. Each person has different capacities and connections and outreach in their own communities. So these are just ideas and suggestions from the perspective of Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. We know that there's many organizations doing fabulous things across Canada. Today, though, I'm going to focus on from the perspective of Ontario and the work that we've been doing at Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario with our community partners and within our own organizations. We're going to talk a little bit about where do you fit in terms of what your role is. We're going to look at that from the perspective of the ecological model and look at practical suggestions, give some ideas around some best practices, what is out there, what are people doing, how maybe you can adapt those for your own community. And so this is just kind of a beginning point of looking at some illustrations of actions to spark the dialogue for yourself and to generate more ideas for engagement in your own communities, and possibly reach out to one of our partners if you're not already involved to see how you too could get involved in your own local community or city, town, neighborhood to take action to address the needs of older adults in abuse prevention. So this is a roadmap. And as with all roadmaps, there are many different routes and journeys one can take to reach a common destination. And this roadmap is no different. You may not be engaged in any activities or stepped onto that road to prevent or advocate for change in abuse prevention, or perhaps you may not have done anything in terms of prevention or advocacy. Maybe at that intersection along the journey, not sure which way to turn or take the next step, and that's okay. There are individuals and organizations and leaders ready to help and support you along this journey. This is a shared road that creates space for groups and populations and to have opportunities to tap into their experience and wisdom of diverse communities and facilitate community dialogues and offer multiple perspectives in reaching our goal. This roadmap is really just a starting point. So during this module, we're going to dive deeper into those, reviewing some of those best practices to promote the safety and reduce the risk of elder abuse through showcasing, as I mentioned, some best case or successful models that we have. And we'll showcase sort of what that kind of looks like and look at where you fit into that roadmap, where you can start on that road to make this social change. In Ontario, we've done many different activities and initiatives throughout the inception of the elder abuse strategy in Ontario, which started in 2003. We've worked with many organizations and agencies to build on their capacity and outreach. And really, it's really come down to pooling our resources, coming together as a collective, working collaboratively to make change in the community towards the prevention of elder abuse. And it's really around that partnership building. And I think that we can't say enough about that, that we can do things alone, but we gain so much more when we do work together in this collective building relationships as we go. And we know that that evolves over time. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, is that over time, we expand those partnerships to make those changes. And we all have different contributions. And each of those contributions builds on one another, and we adapt and we move forward and try to reach our goal. So, as I mentioned, we're going to just highlight some of those partnerships as we go through this initiative. We are going to also talk about some of the successes we've also achieved in working with our elected officials, our government ministries, to reach the goals that we've attained to this date. So, how can you contribute? Social change projects involves and includes everyone, no matter where you are in all parts of the country. You could be in northern Canada, southern Ontario, British Columbia. It doesn't matter where you may be located. You can have a role to play. And a lot of times we do hear that from individuals and saying, well, I'm not sure what I should do or what I can do to contribute or to help. But there are ways that you can get involved in your own communities. And we all have a unique role to play. We can all contribute something different in our own communities, and not everyone is the same. So we all have the capacity to influence change. And sometimes we don't realize the influence or impact that we can make from the actions that we take. So we hope that this journey as we start will inspire you to take action in your own region and in your own community. So let's build upon that road and start down, looking at where you fit in. So just getting back to our rules, looking at where you can contribute, we kind of built this, the approaches from different perspectives. So you could be a citizen, an advocate, an organization, you could be a leader, you could be in government, you could be professional, you could be a researcher, or a citizen within the different communities that you reside in. So we all have different lenses that we come from when we look at abuse prevention. And that is great because when we integrate our ideas and approaches, we find that there's so much more that we can accomplish through using that intersectionality lens and working with across sectors. So it's not only just if you're in one box as a citizen, there's overlap within those, within each of these pillars of groups, because you could be a leader in an organization, but you're also a citizen, when you're not at work. And you can be an advocate at work, and, be a leader within your organization. So there's so many ways that they interact or intersect. And we'll talk about that as we go through. So just kind of looking at this and saying, well, where do I fit in within these pillars? And where does that, do I fit in a few, or do I fit in just one? And we'll go through a few of these to give some examples. And when we go through to recognize where your role is how do you become engaged with people? Like, what is the clear vision, and what is the role that you can take? So, as I mentioned, we all have a role, no matter where we are within those boxes in terms of our roles. But we can work together, and I think that's the key: is working together to prevent the violence and abuse of older people. So as I mentioned earlier, we kind of look things from the ecological model. So looking at it from an individual, a relationship perspective, community, and social and societal level. These don't act in isolation, because as you can see, they are layered on top of each other. So as we go through this, we're going to give some examples as from a perspective of a citizen, what kind of actions that you can contribute, because that's what this is about. What can you contribute to as a citizen? What can you contribute to as an organization and as a leader? We'll go through those in a little bit more detail. And as a community member, are you involved in any elder abuse networks within the where you reside, within the province that you live in, or the community? And also looking at governments. What can governments do to move this social change forward, to prevent and to fund some of the infrastructure that we need to support older adults in the community? And where does the policies fit in within organizations, within government, to address issues such as ageism and structural violence that we see in our society? It's a collaborative approach, and this roadmap will hopefully take us through the different steps that we can all take to position ourselves to make change and create opportunities as we move forward. Because as I mentioned, this is a strategy that's going to evolve and grow over time. And as more people read it, understand it, and implement it within their communities, it has a vast impact in changing the way that we look and respond to elder abuse across Canada. So as citizens, think of yourself and recognizing what can you do to learn the warning signs, to respond safely and supportively, to know what resources are in your communities to support older adults and our families who might be recognizing abuse, or having a family member or a neighbor that might be experiencing abuse. We look at this from recognize, respond, and refer. And you'll hear that a lot in many presentations that people do, and written work that you might see on the internet, or organizations that are recognize, respond, and refer is so important in terms of knowing how to see what elder abuse is. Knowing if we don't recognize it, then we don't know don't know how to respond or how to do that safely. So if we don't respond or recognize the signs, it goes unnoticed, and the violence will just continue to escalate over time. And we know that our population of older adults is growing, and we know that the incidences of abuse in terms of calls has increased. So it's time to start doing something more collaboratively across Canada to make a huge impact in making everyone more aware, and to prevent this from happening. So, what's a good practice, a good example of a best practice model in terms of educating everyone around the issue of warning signs and elder abuse is the program called It's Not Right: Neighbors, Friends, and Families. So, in Ontario, we were very successful in implementing this program. And it's a lot of focus is around U power. So I can't stress enough of how important that is, because when people start to disclose something happening, if you are that first person who gets the story, or someone discloses information to you, we sometimes refer to that as the first responder, because you're the first person that someone has actually disclosed to. How do you deal with that? How do I start that conversation? How do I support that person to give them the resources? The It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends, and Families program was done initially through the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, through a pan-Canadian approach, similar to looking at the development of this strategy. And some partners as well that were involved in that contributed to this development of this roadmap. And this project, and outcome of this was significant. This looks at abuse and response through the lens of a bystander, and looking at it from a you power approach, that we all have the power to make a difference in someone's life. That people who are most closest to individuals who are experiencing abuse are those family, friends, and neighbors. And often those are the individuals that we need to engage. Those are the bystanders who might hear firsthand what's happening and may not be equipped to know how to respond. So, and we find that in many domestic violence situations that it may not get to an organizational level, but usually it's a neighbor, friend, or family that knows there's something wrong, but may not know how to respond or feel comfortable doing that, or knowing, what approach do I take to assist someone. And so we built upon this program around the It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends, and Family, and adapted that. So individuals, when we do training, we look at how do we can change social norms around aging? How can we make it our own business instead of walking away and saying, oh, that's not really what I saw. There's nothing that we can do about it. That idea or mindset that, well, happens all the time. There's nothing I can do to change that family or help that senior. And also changing the idea or the ideology around aging and ageism, that age, diminishes our value, which is so incorrect, and discrimination against older adults. So this program really encompasses all of those factors when we deliver the training. And one of the other key components of this is that one small action that someone can do, including yourself, can make a huge impact and difference in the lives of an older person. And we are powerful. Sometimes we don't really recognize the impact that we can make when we even start asking a general question to an older adult who might be in need of support. So as this release of this roadmap really follows our engagement around how we as citizens and organizations can look at this roadmap and their uptake along the journey. So, this is going to grow as we go on in terms of looking at, implementing some of these programs like It's Not Right, and putting that into their community and making an impact, not only within their own communities, but across the country. So as an example, this program around It's Not Right really focuses on these learning outcomes. So in Ontario, when back in 2017, we did have funding from our Ontario Ministry of Seniors, that's what the name was at the time, and now it's called the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility in Ontario. But at the time, they invested money into a 15-month project where we took this program out into the community through the support and assistance through our elder abuse networks, to do education, to host train-the-trainer workshops. We worked with the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, with Elder Abuse with Prevention Ontario, to enlist professionals and advocates and citizens in that project to move towards the prevention of abuse, and move towards a movement of social change. And we found huge success in the work that we did. Within the year that we were doing this work, we surpassed our goal, reaching over 10,000 citizens through offering train-a-trainer workshops for champions. When we delivered, those people who were trained as champions, then went into their own communities to deliver education sessions into smaller groups. So they would go into their faith communities, their senior groups, or in their neighborhoods, or in their organizations, to do an education session around how people can recognize and respond and refer. And at the time, we mapped out these actions. not just as we're doing with the roadmap, we ask people to put themselves on a map. Tell us what you're doing. What impact are you making? If you did a presentation and you reached 5 people, that is awesome. And we want to hear about it. So that is similar to what we're doing with the roadmap. So there's some integration between what we've learned in the past and how we can put that into the work that we're doing now. So we want to track people and understand where we are across the country in terms of the impact that we're making. The It's Not Right program was also implemented within different provinces, including British Columbia, Alberta, Quebec, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Um, there's been investments through our government with this program. So when we look back in terms of what our role and responsibilities are, where do we fit in that picture? So it's not only as citizens who became trained as champions to recognize what are the signs and how to become a champion to educate others. We had organizations doing this who are training their staff, but we also had people at the government level who are funding these initiatives. And you can see not only within Ontario, but across other provinces and territories around building the infrastructure to support the education, the training, and the movement to create this social change. And we're building on that. And we continue to, across all of those communities and organizations and provinces, that work has been done across Canada, and we've seen the impact. Part of that program, when we're looking at the training of those champions, comes with looking at from a perspective of the sync it conversation. See it, name it, check it. So we've looked at things like see it if things don't feel right? What are the warning signs that make you concerned? How do I name that? How do I talk to that individual about it? And how do I check with that person to see if what I'm thinking or feeling is actually accurate? So how do I talk to that person? So in the next slide, I want to show you just a short video of how this program is actually used. There are many tools that have been developed through this that are available to everyone through training workshops that we can provide and train people to become champions to deliver this education. So this is just kind of an example of one of 8 videos that are developed through this program to educate people on what to look for. This is a scenario that we hear about all the time around moving in with family members or a family member moving in with an older adult, and some of the complications that can come. And when a friend recognizes it, how do they respond? So I'm just going to show you this short little video, and then we'll just have a little brief conversation about it to see, just highlight some of the key factors in the prevention.
How are things going with your son being home?
I feel badly for him. He's having such a hard time of it. He and his daughter moved upstairs on the weekend.
And where does that leave you?
In the spare room.
In the basement? I'm worried about you. Your life has changed so much. Are you okay?
So that video really just demonstrates a response to abuse. The son moves in and sort of takes over. And then the response and the impact of the friend to support the older adult is we walk through people about how to have those supportive conversations, because can be an uncomfortable conversation if someone doesn't feel prepared or maybe knowing how to start that conversation. So this program teaches people to see the signs, demonstrate how and what reactions and statements can make an impact on a senior, and the openness to seek help and how to start that conversation to assist older adults. So as I mentioned, we reached over 10,000 individuals with this education, and this program continues to be implemented across Ontario by different organizations and communities, ourselves included. And we can think about this, look at this pan-Canadian approach about how we can make an impact. Think about yourselves and where do you contribute? Could you become a trained facilitator? Could you host a workshop? Could you invite a trained champion somewhere within your province to come and do a workshop? Could you provide an opportunity to have an education session if you have a seniors group that gets together to invite someone to do an education session? These sessions can be 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how long the group has. And maybe your workplace, is there any strategies in your workplace knowing how to recognize the signs and for staff to know how to respond if they do encounter maybe a client who might be encountering abuse? So let's move on to being an advocate. So everyone can learn to teach themselves. We can all take action and maybe going to different websites, such as the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, or come to Ontario, our elder abuse website, which is eapon.ca, to check out information, new resources. There's tools and fact sheets and videos. There's webinars that we do on a regular basis to teach, educate people on abuse prevention on a variety of topics, not just the different types of abuse, but we talk about different things around financial abuse, powers of attorney. There's many, many things that we can do to teach ourselves, because when we teach ourselves, we can educate and teach others. And again, getting back to recognizing those signs. We can learn about ageism. Ageism is, discrimination is rampant, and we need to, it also influences the human rights of older adults and affects those older adults, taking away their rights and privileges. So we need to address that. How can you become more educated around ageism? How do we start that conversation without having an ageism lens when we start those conversations? And then reaching out to someone that we're concerned about, to take that step forward. And we all have that different capacity and role in the work that we can do to make these things change. So I want to move on to communities. So if you recall on the ecological model, we had individuals and then we had communities and relationships. So where in communities can we make a difference in the prevention of abuse? So in your own city, do you have an age-friendly city or community? Is there a plan? Does your municipality have a mandate to address elder abuse? And if not, maybe we need to start that conversation and addressing ageism and elder abuse in your own communities. And that can be done wherever you fit in terms of your role and capacity to respond and make an impact in your own area. Age-friendly communities are a World Health Organization initiative. Many, many communities and organizations are involved in age-friendly committees across not only within Canada, but in Ontario. We actually have a collaborative of age-friendly cities and communities funded through the government, but also work in our own municipalities to how we work towards our best practices around being age-friendly. And that includes respecting older adults, looking at inequalities for older adults, protecting those who are most vulnerable, and promoting the inclusion of older adults in communities. Because many, many communities a long time ago were not very inclusive and age-friendly. So we're seeing a movement moving forward to making sure that we are addressing the needs of older adults. And I just want to bring this from the perspective of the lens from elder abuse prevention. And even though elder abuse is not part of one of the 8 pillars or 8 petals on the age-friendly initiative, it fits into the safety aspect of these initiatives. It fits into social participation, outdoor spaces and buildings, as well as respect and social inclusion. And there are many really good examples of how age-friendly communities have integrated elder abuse within their plans. So I know there across Canada, many plans have incorporated elder abuse. So I just wanted to highlight a couple that I know of that I was working with in the past. Now, I know that many of these projects or these initiatives have been updated since their inception, But when they first started in these plans, the Peterborough Age Friendly Initiative outlined in their plan that they were going to address the issues around elder abuse. And it wasn't just um, senior safety. It was very specific in the work that they were doing to address this in terms of outreach to individuals as well as intergenerational programming. And in the slide, you'll see in the yellow highlights where they actually said or indicated where the actions that they were going to take. And our organization at that time was very involved in rolling out some of these initiatives, including the Tea and Talk, where we have a program in Ontario where it's called the Tea and Talk program, where it's talking to seniors about all different issues, including elder abuse, over casual conversation, increasing public awareness through social media campaigns that they had done, an ageism campaign that they had put out to their community, working to do safe senior safety guides, fostering relationships with LGBTQ older adults and developing safe spaces. And we did workshops. So you can see this is just an example of how a community funded through municipality. So we have engagement of not only the government, we have citizens, and we have organizations working collaboratively to make change to address the needs of older adults for the prevention of elder abuse. The other example I just wanted to highlight is Toronto. So the Toronto Senior Strategy. Again, this was the initial strategy, but back when they first started it, they have recommendations that they are going to address diverse elder populations, address being age friendly. They're looking at addressing elder abuse, training staff, again, within even the organizations and city as well. Looking at from a policing perspective, which is funded through our municipalities and is funded through citizens, and the police are taking involved in terms of looking at developing a community liaison committee, which continues to exist. Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario does participate in that, and elder abuse is one of the main issues that is addressed through that committee. So these are practical examples that can be adapted in other communities. And if you don't have an age-friendly community, maybe it's something that you can talk to your municipality about to get further information about if the elder abuse is not in the plan, how can it be incorporated into the plan? These plans, similar to our strategy, is evolving and changes over time as needs change. So how can you reach that goal? I think that's important for us to look out and say, where can I help? Many of these age-friendly communities have subcommittees or subgroups, and there's different ways that you can participate and engage as a citizen to become involved in making change to improve the safety and well-being of older adults. So let's look at communities from a perspective of supporting elder abuse networks. Do you have a network within your jurisdiction, in your area, in your community? Have you looked at from a provincial standpoint, from a local standpoint? And we know that we have a national, which is the Canadian network. But where do you fit in terms of your own municipality or your own region that you live in? Within Ontario, we support many elder abuse networks. There's 30 plus elder abuse networks that we work with. And those networks, when we say elder abuse network, they are volunteer individuals that come together usually once a month to educate and inform and facilitate training sessions, awareness events, to inform elected officials of key issues that need to be addressed. In many different provinces and across Canada, there are networks, not in every province and territory, which is where maybe you can start to fit in. If there isn't one in your province or territory that you see, how can you get engaged in maybe starting one? Call one of the organizations one of the provincial organizations that does exist and say, how can we get that started? How can we get our government involved in supporting our network? And that's not only within the provincial level, but also the local level as well. So as you can see here, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario We also have the British Columbia, the BCCRNs, and Alberta, the Northwest Territories, Newfoundland, and Manitoba. In the bottom here is just an example of some of the other networks in Ontario. As I said, there's 30 of them. Many of them have logos and have websites. They're out on social media. Again, their goal is to promote education, awareness, increase a collaborative response to abuse, work together as in initiatives to address the needs of older adults in their communities. There's excellent work being done, and they are doing it voluntarily. However, how can we build further infrastructure through funding from a government perspective to support the needs at the local level to ensure that this work continues and sustained in the long term? So let's look at this from a community's perspective in terms of your municipality. So how can we educate and engage municipal staff to learn about elder abuse and ageism, to support training, to fund the training, to fund elder abuse networks maybe locally? There are, as I mentioned, there are many networks across Ontario that don't receive funding. In fact, actually, almost all of them don't receive funding. So how can we support them to, besides project funding, to get sustained funding to do the great work that they are doing, to do education and support that community response? And how can we engage those municipalities to convene and host community events and engage citizens to take action? So the Age-Friendly Communities Initiative is one way that municipalities can get involved and show their support. But there are other initiatives that can be done to look at this. The other initiative that we would encourage people to do is, how can you become engaged as citizens to get your elected officials informed? We're coming up to an election year in Ontario anyway. And how can we make this, how can we get this on the agenda? How do we get the attention of municipal leaders to recognize that this is, in fact, a significant issue that needs to be prioritized? Relationship and violence in relationship is a nonpartisan issue. It should be on everyone's agenda to address. And how do we engage those individuals in these conversations? Asking them to further support the strategy and use their power and influence to support the Future Us goals. Providing them a copy of this if they don't already have them, writing them a letter to engage in the conversations, having a meeting to sit down and talk about what are the local issues. Your issues within your community may be different from someone else within a different province or even 50 kilometers away. How do we get their attention to recognize this as a priority and hold an all candidates meeting to talk about what is their plan to address seniors issues, including elder abuse prevention and addressing ageism. Some of the successes that we've seen working with our elected officials, I think a great example is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. We've had great success. It's an equalizer event because it's on June 15th. We, across the world, people are recognizing this day to recognize not only the contributions of older adults, but recognizing this as an issue that needs to, both a public health and a human rights issue. We've had engagement within municipal, provincial, and federal leaders recognizing this day and participating in events. So we've seen the impact of government officials in their dedication to support the prevention of elder abuse. Through World Elder Abuse Awareness Day last year, many cities and municipalities proclaimed World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. The Honorable Mayor Ford provided a video statement to elder abuse prevention through our social media campaign that we held. Officials attended local events last year were through Zoom, but in the past they have come to in-person events. And one great example is in Durham region, where the local network held a Zoom event, and all the mayors within that municipality of Durham region attended a virtual event. All of them, showing their commitment and recognition of this important initiative that we need, this important issue that we need to address. We've seen officials write press releases, post information on their websites, address issues at council meetings, wear purple, which is the color of that people wear for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And we also saw last year the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recognize the day in his speech on June 15th. So we are making progress. We are seeing the elected politicians take action. We need to continue to work towards making the social change, getting them involved, and doing this together because we all need to play a role. And as you can see, even through World Abuse Awareness Day, as citizens, as organizations, as networks, as government politicians, we can all play a role and work together to make change. And if we can further develop that through even this, taking those learnings and best practices and apply those through this strategy and roadmap, we can make even further headway in terms of preventing elder abuse. So from an organizational point of view, so where do you fit in? Do you work with a community-based organization? Are you in a hospital organization? Wherever you may fit, you could play a role as a leader, as an employer, in terms of preventing abuse. So what are the best practices? So there are policies and procedures that could be done. Do you have policy or procedure? Are you doing training? Have you addressed the issue of ageism? Are you responding to the needs of clients and coworkers from a trauma and violence informed approach? So those are important questions to ask yourself. And then reflecting back on how can you get involved if you aren't? And if you are, how do I take that maybe further to the next step? So we can all be educated, as I mentioned, about be informed about about how to recognize. So are there professional days that we can do to work with our staff? Because there may be issues where clients will come in. And if we have an ageist attitude towards our clients, then they aren't going to get the help that they need. In fact, it may be just turn them away and they may not come back for support again. So we have to think about how do we become leaders in recognizing our own ageist attitudes, putting policies into place where we recognize ageism that could happen and how we have a policies that integrate so we can address some of those inequalities within our policies. Looking at age, is age even included within policies? How are we viewing that? And even looking at from a policy perspective from organizations, we hospitals, do hospitals all have policies? Look at your own facility that you work in. Do you have a policy to respond? Do you know how to address the needs of your clients if your staff are going out into community or within your own organization or a business to know what to do and how to support those individuals? We've seen great strides in terms of some organizations doing training. We've worked with the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario in the capacity where they've trained their volunteers with the It's Not Right program. They've trained their staff around the It's Not Right program. They're doing ongoing education sessions on a quarterly basis where we're involved in supporting and educating staff on the different forms of abuse. And those are, from an organizational point of view, that's leadership. That's taking the initiative to say, okay, we're going to have these lunch and learns, giving people that opportunity to know what to do and tailor that training to the needs of their staff so they can support clients better if they do come across that senior or client who might be vulnerable or experiencing abuse. So they're prepared. So as I mentioned before, you're looking at it from your own professional point of view and in what capacity. So it could be, as I mentioned, like the Alzheimer's Society organizing an It's Not Right training. It's very doable. There's many, many champions out there that are providing this education. Looking at ageism from a structural violence perspective, that cause that unintentional harm. So sometimes people don't recognize even their ageist behaviors until we kind of point that out and some of their actions and comments and how that can be so demeaning and for older adults. Looking at those human resources and programs to become inclusive and making sure that we address that violence issues within the workplace. there is legislation. The federal and regional legislation identifies workplace violence and harassment as workplace hazards. So, how do we incorporate the issue around elder abuse within that capacity, and being able to uh, protect the safety of our workers, because they could be involved if you have older clients, older staff, they too may be a victim of violence. And how do we support them in that capacity? So we need to be better and trained, and also looking at this from a trauma and violence informed approach. So when we say that, these are really policies and practices that recognize the connections between violence and trauma, and the negative health outcomes and behaviors that attribute to that. These approaches increase safety, control, resilience for people who are seeking assistance in relation to their experiences of violence, and have a history of have a history of experiencing violence. So there's four main principles around trauma-informed violence approaches, and you'll see them here outlined. So, understanding um, understanding the trauma and violence and the impact on people's lives and behaviors. We need to create emotionally and physically safe environments for individuals, foster opportunities for choice and collaboration and connection, and provide strength-based and capacity approach to support the client through coping and resilience. And these are really important to apply within your work that you're doing, not only with your senior with your employees, your senior clients, um, because work that we do, we incorporate that, particularly in the trainings that we do. We address that, but also when we do case consultations with our seniors or families and organizations responding to case situations presented on the phone or in person, we incorporate that in terms of responding through the lens of from using that trauma and violence informed approach, because we don't know what trauma that person may or may not have had in the past. So we must be sensitive and integrate this into the work that we're doing. And we encourage everyone to do the same. Also it addresses the issues around ageism, because, it does integrate. How do we become better informed so we don't become ageist in our responses, and just sort of, don't take it as serious because the person is an older versus a younger individual. And it does require some fundamental changes in how our systems are designed, our organizations function, and practitioners engage with people to follow those policies. So, looking at, better way that we can support and respond to those individuals' needs. And lastly, I just want to point out, in terms of our government, we need that further support. So how can governments contribute to the strategy, on this roadmap to change the future directions or of the prevention of elder abuse? We've seen over time the commitment for funding and funding grants. A good example of that is the New Horizons for Seniors grants. If you look at the priorities, elder abuse has been a priority of our funding areas that they provide for projects and initiatives in communities across Canada, to give the smaller communities and organizations the funding for delivering programs in their own communities. But we also need to look at how we can share funding costs across different levels. How can we share funding through from municipalities to provincial to federal? Because if we can work more collaboratively through our funding structures, then more programs can be sustainable. The infrastructure for response can be achieved. And how do we work through our cross-ministerial collaborations? It's not just one ministry that's responsible. We, as those working in government, need to talk to the other government ministries, whether that's Ministry for Attorney General, Ministry for Seniors, or Housing, long-term care. We all have a role to play in responding. So those actions are happening, but how can we make those stronger? And how can we educate governments at all levels about this important issue? Are there opportunities that we can create and open that door to inform? You know, as I mentioned, social media is a great way, having meetings with individual, MPs, inviting them to events as we've talked about. There's so many different ways that we can inform and align governments to need to get involved in the work that we're doing and learn from each other. You know, and this strategy, this roadmap does outline um, the different commitments from different governments that's on there. And I would encourage you to look at the roadmap online on the website because it does show sort of that in the document itself. Where the commitments are being made and where we need to continue to contribute to ensure all provinces and everyone's playing a role in the capacity that they can to respond to the needs of older adults. So we all need to take a role as a society to address the violence against older adults because we have seen an increase of abuse rates, particularly during the pandemic, where we've seen isolated seniors, sometimes living with their abuser with no supports and being isolated. We have a long way to go to make sure that all seniors have an affordable income, food security, equality, and their health care and their human rights are observed and protected. So we need to work collaboratively. We need to work with one another across all those sectors, as I mentioned, around individuals and communities, organizations and government, and as society members to work towards this common goal. So this is just a short video I wanted to show that we developed at the initial stages when we were developing our work to get people working together, working collaboratively. So I'm just going to show this short little video that this describes that.
Creating a society where people of all ages are respected and have an opportunity to contribute to the well-being of their community is a goal worth working toward. Individuals, organizations, communities, and governments need to work together to protect and preserve our human rights. In Canada, too many older adults are living in isolation, in poverty, are alone or mistreated, often by family members who may not recognize the impact of their actions as abuse or neglect. When you support an older adult who is experiencing any form of mistreatment, you help create a supportive community. It counts. Your support says, I see what is happening. I am concerned. It's not your fault. I believe you. I am here for you. You are an important member of our community. Even small actions can have a big impact, especially when the person you are supporting is alone or afraid. Change is possible. We can create a society that values and respects people of all ages, now and for the generations to come. It's up to you. What kind of a community do you want to grow old in? Let's start today. Look for elder abuse networks in your area. You can learn more about recognizing and responding to abuse and neglect of older adults by visiting Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario.
So I thought that would be a great way to end our module today because it really does reinforce the message of our future strategy. It is about working together. It's this road that we are taking together, working along, joining at different parts of the journey and how we can play a role, reflecting back on what you can do in your own capacity, in your own community, to initiate and make changes, to become involved, to make the future us a better place. Thank you so much for participating today in this module to learn how you can contribute on this journey and learn more about the roadmap by checking out the website listed below. Thank you again, and now I'll turn it back to Benedict. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raeann. Join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern for our next session with Laura Temblin-Watt of CanAge, who will speak about policy matters. See you there.